Hello everyone, it's Bavar from PTC here again with another video in our ongoing ship overview series. We're here with the latest video to give you a bit of an overview on one of the most well-known, well-loved and frankly a surprisingly well-storied ship. The superbly agile and impeccably equipped Aegis Gladius. Throughout this video we will cover the ship's lore, her overall feature set and specifications, and then round off with how we like to use the ship as well as any real-world equivalents. As an aside, I'm normally not a light fighter pilot, as I'm typically the Mole or Caterpillar or C2 pilot for the org. So for all the fighter jocks out there watching this video and cringing in disgust, mea culpa, joysticks helped, but my experience triumphed and overcame them. When it comes to the Gladius and her lore, you'll find she is one of the most storied fighters of the verse, with her history being intrinsically linked to the 36th Squadron and the preceding Stilettos. With regards to the lore, we will first cover the fall of the Olympus and her Stiletto defenders, before then moving on to her performance in the Second Tavaran War, and finally how she has fared against the Vandal and her current status, with newer ships like the Arrow, the F8 and the Hornets being rolled out. The most famous squadron to fly the Gladius was the 36th Squadron, whose birth is intrinsically tied to the fall of the UEE Olympus in 2573. The battle carrier Olympus had been tasked to pursue a band of pirates and rebels back to their home base in the Null system, which was fairly undeveloped at the time, creating quite a lovely little hideaway far from prying eyes. Now, whilst on the face of it this should have been a home run, what with the UEE battle carrier and her attendant craft against what seemed to be a fairly ragtag bunch of rebels, etc., we can't forget what seems to effectively almost be a tradition at this point regarding UEE capital ships and atmospheres. And, well, if we're being perfectly honest here, the trend of UEE admirals being glory whores. Instead of doing the same thing and letting the carrier's attendant craft or her extended range weaponry do the work, the admiral decided to personally charge in to claim the kill. Whilst approaching the hideout and the pirate and rebel ships, the Olympus's course took it too close to the system's fifth planet. As I'm sure you'd agree, the atmosphere was a bit of a drag at that point, especially since the battle carrier was unable to escape the gravity field as well, thereby ensuring her fall to the world below, despite every effort of her valiant crew. Sadly, this resulted in almost all hands lost upon the ship's calamitous impact. The survivors consisted of 4 Stilettos, who were the ship's combat air patrol, as well as 2 others who managed to launch during mid-freefall, and what few lifeboats had been able to be jettisoned. Understandably seeking to take advantage of their miraculous change in fortunes, the rebels and pirates pressed the attack. What happened next went down in history as one of the great last stands. Those 6 Stilettos held the line for about an hour, outnumbered at least 6-1. By the end of their ultimately desperate and doomed struggle, they were credited with downing 37 enemy craft, including a pocket destroyer with naught but their energy weapons and their refusal to go quietly into the night. Inevitably, all UE fighters were eventually destroyed, as were all survivors clinging to life in the lifeboats. Now, you would quite rightly wonder how the story got out. After all, the pirates and rebels understandably might not want to draw the sort of heat that would follow them boasting about what they had done. To that effect, the black box of Lieutenant Jasmine Tuttle was subsequently required by an enterprising pirate after the fact and sold to her family back on Earth. The UEE, never being ones to miss free PR, saw a propaganda opportunity in the tragedy and decided to make heroes out of those pilots who they'd effectively doomed through a series of recruiting adverts focusing on doing your duty, a Holovid series and founding the 36 Fighter Squadron to honour the pilots and their heroism. With that being said, whilst the Stiletto was a capable interceptor, she was a bit long in the tooth and did suffer when it came to incorporating modern shields and her spare parts availability, as her manufacturer, Elio Harmons, had gone bankrupt. And well, over time, this led to a very pressing need for a new, modern interceptor or light fighter that could meet the UE's needs and requirements. The Gladius, it seems, was deemed the answer, as she was developed in the 26th century, with her frame being purposely designed to be easily upgraded. With the lessons from the Stiletto learned, the Gladius was repeatedly upgraded and overhauled over the next 300 and odd years. This upgradability, whilst retaining the base space frame, has meant pilots of the newer variants would struggle to fly the original craft, especially if they've come to it from the more modern variants. Now, when it comes to the Gladius's service career, ever since her inception, she's seen action in pretty much every operational type over the past 300 years, such as anti-piracy operations, reconnaissance, interception and combat air patrol duties, search and rescue missions, and jump scouting, naturally necessitating the installation of extended duration packs. During these missions, she's recorded thousands of kills against every sort of adversary, ranging from pirates and armed rebels to unidentified aggressors and the Vandal. One can hardly talk about the Gladius and her service career without mentioning the 36th Squadron, which formally came online January 1st, 2579, 6 years after the fall of the Olympus and the creation of the Gladius. Being designed from the get-go to be an improvement on the Stiletto, Gladius was the UEEN's first choice for interception duties in this regard. As an aside, before the 36 Squadron's creation, the standard doctrine at the time was to have patrol units or CAPs being generally considered a secondary consideration to the heavier and better equipped jack-of-all-trades units. The patrol or CAP squadrons were generally not considered a priority for academy graduates and were mostly made up of draftees and OCS pilots. The first change to the 36 after its founding was changing this practice. This was done through using a mentoring system and having the more experienced veterans train the patrol elements of the other squadrons, thereby disseminating the experience and the expertise. A drastic change in the primary duties of the 36th Squadron was at the start of the Second Tavaran War in 2603. Within the first day of the war, the wing had been shoved to the front. They soon found their assets spread across 4 escort carriers charged with screening the main battle force. Whilst the Tavaran had some early successes against the UEE capital ships, not one of the warships assigned to the 36th Squadron's Gladius coverage suffered a single torpedo strike during the entirety of the war. With these successes under their belts, the squadron never returned to their mentor or training role, and ever since the Vandal raids have started picking up, they've repeatedly found themselves rotating through frontier assignments. During one of these rotations, a 36th Squadron Gladius element commander, Captain Jordan Toothpick Hampton, developed and perfected the 3-fighter carrion leap technique for countering the heavier Vandal scythe. And it was also a 36th Squadron pilot who noticed a slight infrared scanner irregularity that subsequently allowed UEE pilots to target early scythes hidden in asteroid fields, which was much a preferred tactic of theirs. Now, while modern Hornets can hoe through scythe squadrons, this was very much not the case in the early days of the conflict. For roughly the first decade or so of the resurgent Vandal raids, destroying or disabling a scythe took both great agility and a good deal of coordination, the first being very much a speciality of the Gladius's design, and the second was something well ingrained into the experienced pilots of the 36th. The squadron's most well-known engagement against the Vandal took place on the 3rd of August 2940. During the escort mission covering a Hull Sea carrying refugees, a force of 12 Gladiuses was ordered to provide close escort for a civilian transport evacuating survivors. Whilst undertaking these escort duties, the Hull Sea and her escorts somehow stumbled across the largely undefended rear of a Vandal supply fleet. By utilizing the Hull Sea's computational power for fire control, a group of just 12 Gladiuses was able to swiftly down 9 fully laden mule transports and their attendant light escort. Once again, the UEE, sensing an easy PR win, played this up in the media following a string of several stinging Vandal raids and defeats. As to their current status, parts of the squadron are presently forward deployed on board the UEE Sebek. Due to the active combat deployments, there isn't a lot of information currently available about the squadron. That being said, with how often the 36 squadron pilots appear in the casualty lists, one can surmise that they regularly see action and that battle is joined on a regular basis. The wing has also been essential in anti-piracy operations, with a number of these operations better known. An often reproduced photo shows the nose of a Gladius bearing the patch of 36 and 24 Drake Cutlass outlines. Despite the military's highly publicized Battle Ready campaign to revitalize older space frames, observers are unanimous in believing that the ship has less than a decade of active service remaining. The final Gladius service pack was issued 8 months ago, improving weapon systems and control surfaces, but no additional upgrades have been contracted. With the Gladius being increasingly assigned to reserve wings and guard units and home defense squadrons, the era of these acrobatic light fighters serving as the tip of the sword is sadly coming to an end. The rumour mill suggests that the 36 may be one of the first elite units to transition to the F-8A. This isn't exactly something that the pilots are terribly pleased with. After all, they've spent generations at this point proving that a great deal can be accomplished with very little in terms of hardware, and as such, very few pilots are eager to adopt the most complex piece of military equipment in human history. The Gladius, in summary as it were, has proven effective against the older Vandal blades, to which it is considered a rough 1-to-1 match. However, the Gladius starts to show its age against the latest enemy aircraft, or spacecraft I should say, and they have had to increasingly rely on new tactics to counter these new threats. Sadly, in summary, all good things come to an end. Beginning in the 2930s, squadrons began to phase out the Gladius and convert to craft such as the F-8 Lightning, the F-7A Hornet, and the Anvil Arrow, with the surplus Gladiuses becoming available in the civilian market. In 2951, as a response to the demand for civilian variants of the ship, the Aegis increased the budget of Gladius production and invested in additional upgrade packages and next-generation variants of the design. As for the Gladius's overall size and features, she has a length of 20 meters, a beam of 17, and a height of about 4.5, with her purchase price for now being 1.1 million and some spare change. When it comes to components, she's fairly standard across the board for a ship of her size, with all of her gear being size 1 in nature. Whilst a light fighter, you do have some redundancy with your coolers and shields, but only one power plant. In terms of weapons, as a default, she comes with triple size 3 mounts and 4 missile racks, being able to handle up to 4 size 3 missiles, but down to 16 size 1s. In terms of special features, she has an ejection seat, a gun rack, and a not insignificant amount of internal storage, again for a ship of her size. Not surprisingly, the Gladius makes a fairly decent dogfighter, as well as being able to act in a rapid response interception role, as well as being able to fight in skirmish warfare. She does have a SEM speed of about 208 meters a second, and an afterburner speed of 1235. Typically speaking, this allows her to engage or disengage at will, against most non-light fighters as well as larger ships, with some notable exceptions. Her acceleration for her various axes is 118 meters and a half per second forwards, 88.6 meters side to side, and 92.1 on the vertical, leading her to a sort of rolling barrel roll sort of fighting style, taking advantage of her forward axis and that vertical strafe ability. When all things are considered, this means picking your targets carefully and knowing when to break off. Her ability to strafe and a keen sense of situational awareness are keen to her survival, especially since she only has two size 1 shields, and like most light fighters, she will tend to struggle against the larger ships or when outnumbered. As for her claim times, you'll find when not expedited, she'll take a leisurely 5 minutes and 4 seconds or thereabouts, and when expedited, about a minute 41 for 2,500 UEC. Surprising no one, PTC likes to use the Gladius as a skirmishing light fighter, doubling as a scout. Key criteria are proximity to where we are launching from, as she doesn't have the best QT range or loiter time once she starts redlining those engines. She also does a decent job at intercepting A2 bombs at JT, and can also double as an escort on a planetary system basis, basically the planet and her moons. As for her real-world equivalent, we've gone with the MiG-29, which was developed to meet a Soviet requirement for a lightweight yet multi-role fighter that focused on shorter-range air defense sorties as well as being capable of rough field takeoffs and landings. She was developed as a response to the American F-16s, with the Su-27 being aimed as an attempt to counter the F-15. Like the Gladius, she is very agile, with excellent instantaneous and sustained turn performance, high alpha capability, and a general resistance to spins. Her fuselage is tested and rated up to 9G or 88 meters a second in terms of maneuvers, and additionally, as a safety precaution, her controls also have soft G and alpha limiters, although these can be manually disabled by a ballsy pilot. She is also capable of carrying some of the most lethal short-range missiles that we know of, as well as having off-boresight capability, thereby giving her advantage in short-range or close-in dogfights. As for the SC equivalent to that, think of using something like the Toby Eye Tracker. I hope you've enjoyed this overview of one of the best light fighters in the game, as well as what turned out to be a surprisingly large amount of lore on the old girl. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like or a comment below, and if you're feeling extra saucy, subscribe. All that being said, what's your favourite light fighter? Are you a stalwart Gladius fan, or an adamant admirer of the Arrow? Or perhaps you're one of the kinky few that enjoy the Cartwheel. This is Bavar from PTC, signing off.